I pulled into the employee lot at Riverside Mall at 1:45, finding the same spot I always took, third from the right, under the broken security light. The mall had been closed for renovations going on 2 months now, which meant our security detail was the only sign of life in a building that used to see thousands of people daily. I grabbed my thermos of coffee from the cup holder, along with my flashlight. The night air felt cool against my face as I stepped out of my old Camry, the door creaking as I pushed it shut. The parking lot stretched empty in every direction, just acres of cracked asphalt under dim lights. Another night in paradise, I muttered to myself, clipping my radio to my belt. The employee entrance was around back, a plain metal door with peeling paint and a keypad that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. Tonight it took 3 tries before the light turned green and the lock clicked open. The service corridor greeted me with its familiar smell, a mix of cleaning chemicals and dust that seemed to coat the back of my throat. Emergency lights cast everything in a sickly yellow glow, making the shadows deeper than they should have been. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as I made my way toward the security office. I found Alvin hunched over the desk, scribbling in the logbook. He looked up when I walked in, his weathered face breaking into a tired smile. "Right on time, Rowan. Just finishing up the report. Anything interesting?" I asked, setting my thermos down on the desk. Alvin shrugged, his broad shoulders rising and falling under his navy uniform. Quiet as a grave, except... He paused, tapping his pen against the logbook. Except what? Those mannequins in Macy's, I swear they're in different spots than yesterday. A chill ran up my back that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. What do you mean, different spots? I mean, I walked through there this morning, and I'm pretty sure that female mannequin with the red blouse was by the escalator. Now she's over by the jewelry counter. I tried to keep my face neutral. The mannequins throughout the mall had always creeped me out. Something about their blank faces and frozen poses made me feel like I was being watched. Probably the renovation crew moving things around, I said, not believing it myself. The renovation team hadn't touched that section yet. Yeah, maybe. Alvin didn't sound convinced either. He closed the logbook and stood up, rolling his sleeves higher on his thick forearms. Listen, I need to do one more walkthrough before I clock out. Got to take some photos of the West Wing for the project manager, something about water damage they found yesterday. I nodded, sliding into the chair he'd vacated. I'll keep an eye on things from here. The security office wasn't much, just a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, a mini fridge, and a wall of monitors showing feeds from the cameras throughout the mall. Most of the screens showed empty corridors and shuttered storefronts. A few displayed mannequins standing in various poses behind store windows, their plastic forms barely visible in the dim security lighting. Should take me about 20 minutes, Alvin said, checking his watch. Then I'm out of here. You good? Yeah, I'm good, I lied. I was never really good during these overnight shifts. Something about the emptiness of the place got under my skin. Alvin grabbed his flashlight from the desk. Radio if you need anything. I watched him leave, his heavy footsteps fading down the corridor until all I could hear was the low hum of the security monitors. I settled back in the chair, taking a sip from my thermos. The coffee was still hot enough to burn the roof of my mouth. The wall of screens in front of me showed nothing but empty spaces. Camera 3 covered the food court, where tables and chairs were stacked against walls waiting for the renovation. Camera 5 showed the main entrance with its glass doors chained shut. Camera 8 panned slowly across the Macy's department store where the mannequins stood frozen in their displays. I leaned forward, squinting at the grainy image. One mannequin wore a business suit, its plastic arm raised as if waving to an invisible customer. Another female figure modeled a summer dress, her blank face turned slightly toward the camera. Were they in the same positions as yesterday? I couldn't really tell from the feed. The radio at my hip crackled. "Rowan, you reading me?" Alvin's voice came through with a slight static. I pressed the talk button. "Yeah, loud and clear. Where are you?" "Just passing JCPenney. These contractor guys left tools all over the place. Make a note in the log, will you?" "Got it," I said, pulling the logbook toward me. I jotted down the time and Alvin's comment about the tools, my pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. On the monitors, I could see Alvin's flashlight beam sweeping across the West Wing corridor. The light bounced off store windows and illuminated more mannequins standing in silent displays. I watched his progress from camera to camera, the only movement in an otherwise still building. The mall had been open for nearly 40 years before closing down. I remembered coming here as a kid, when the place was packed with shoppers and the food court buzzed with conversation. Now it was just empty space waiting to be transformed into whatever the developers had planned. Office space, I'd heard. Maybe medical facilities. The radio crackled again. "Taking some photos of that water damage now," Alvin said. "Then I'll head back." "Roger that," I replied. I turned my attention back to the screens, scanning each feed methodically. Camera 12 showed the second-floor corridor, where a Victoria's Secret store stood dark and empty, except for a blonde mannequin in the window display. Camera 14 panned across Brooks Brothers, where male figures in suits stood like businessmen, frozen in time. Something about those still forms made my skin crawl. In the dim security lighting, they looked almost too human, like people playing a game of statue, waiting for the right moment to move again. I shook my head, trying to clear away the thought. This was exactly why I hated night shifts. My imagination always got the better of me. The minutes ticked by slowly. I checked my watch, 12:10. Almost 7 hours to go until morning. I took another sip of coffee and continued watching the feeds. Camera 6 showed Alvin making his way back toward the security office, his flashlight beam swinging side to side as he walked. I could hear his footsteps growing louder in the corridor outside. He appeared in the doorway a moment later, tucking his camera into his pocket. "All done," he said. "Got the photos the manager wanted." "Find anything else weird?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Alvin shrugged. "Nah, just an empty mall being an empty mall." He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "Though I gotta say, this place feels different at night. Bigger somehow." I nodded. "Yeah, I know what you mean." "Well, she's all yours until morning." Alvin clapped me on the shoulder. "Try not to let the mannequins freak you out too much." He laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Thanks for that," I said dryly. "See you tomorrow, Rowan. Stay awake." He gave a mock salute and headed out the door. I listened to his footsteps fade down the corridor, followed by the distant sound of the employee door opening and closing, then nothing but silence. I was alone in the mall now. The security feeds continued their slow pan across empty spaces. I watched as Camera 8 swept past the mannequins in Macy's again, their shadows stretching long across the tiled floor. In the grainy black and white image, it almost looked like one had turned its head. Almost. I rubbed my eyes and checked my watch again. 12:20. The night stretched before me like an endless corridor, and somewhere in the darkness, dozens of mannequins stood waiting in silent displays. I started my first patrol at 12:30 in the morning, heading toward the East Wing with my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead of me. The mall had that hollow feeling that big empty spaces get at night, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. The beam of light bounced along the floor as I walked, picking up dust particles that hung suspended in the air. My footsteps echoed against the tile, each step sounding louder than it should have. I'd been doing this job for 3 years, but I never got used to how different the mall felt after hours. During the day, it was all noise and movement and life. At night, it was just waiting. I swept my light across a row of empty kiosks. Before the renovations, these would have been selling cell phone cases or cheap jewelry. Now they were just hollow shells with metal grates pulled down. The renovation crew had left their tools scattered around. A ladder here, some paint cans there. I made notes in my little notebook as I went, keeping track of what was where. Just a normal night, I said to myself, my voice sounding small in all that empty space. The emergency lights cast everything in a dim blue glow, barely enough to see by. They made weird shadows in corners and doorways, turning ordinary things into shapes that didn't quite make sense until you got close enough to see what they really were. I checked each store entrance as I passed, all locked and secure. Most had plastic sheets hanging over the fronts where construction was happening. Some had their inventory removed completely, leaving nothing but bare shelves and naked mannequins. The only sounds were my footsteps and the low hum of the emergency lights. That constant electrical buzz followed me everywhere, like white noise that never quite faded into the background. By 1:15, I had made my way to the central corridor. I was thinking about what Alvin had said about the mannequins, wondering if he was just messing with me. Alvin liked to do that sometimes. Tell new guys stories about the mall being haunted, just to see them jump at shadows. I stopped walking so suddenly I almost tripped over my own feet. There was a mannequin standing in the middle of the walkway, just standing there, under a light that kept flickering on and off. It wore a business suit, charcoal gray with a blue tie, and had one arm raised like it was trying to hail a taxi. "What the hell?" I whispered. I knew every inch of this mall by now. That mannequin belonged in the Brooks Brothers display, a good 30 feet away. Someone had moved it out into the middle of the corridor, right where people would walk. I raised my radio to my mouth. "Alvin? You there?" I waited, but all I got back was a harsh burst of static that made me wince. I tried again. "Alvin, you copy?" More static. He was probably in the basement checking the water damage he'd mentioned. Reception was always terrible down there. I looked back at the mannequin. Its face was smooth and featureless, the way most store mannequins are. But something about the way it stood there, arm raised in that frozen gesture, made the hair on my arms stand up. "Renovation crew must have moved you," I said out loud, trying to convince myself. But why would they put it in the middle of the walkway? And Alvin had said that section hadn't been touched yet. I decided to keep going with my patrol. I had the whole mall to cover, and I couldn't spend all night staring at a mannequin. But as I walked away, I kept looking back over my shoulder. Each time, the mannequin was exactly where I'd left it, not moving an inch. Of course, it wasn't moving. It was a mannequin. So why did I keep checking? The food court was next on my route. It used to be the heart of the mall, always busy with people eating and talking. Now, all the tables and chairs were stacked against the walls in twisted piles of metal and plastic. My flashlight beam caught them at odd angles, making them look like piles of bones or the remains of some weird metal creature. The silence felt heavier here. It pressed against my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat. The emptiness seemed to watch me as I moved through the space, my footsteps too loud on the tile floor. I tried the radio again. "Alvin, you reading me?" Nothing but static. I clipped it back to my belt with a sigh. As I continued through the food court, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept thinking about that mannequin standing alone in the corridor and about what Alvin had said about them changing positions. It's just an empty mall, I told myself. Nothing weird about an empty mall. But my words sounded hollow, even to me. Because there was definitely something weird about this empty mall tonight, and I still had hours left on my shift to get through. I finished the East Wing patrol at 2 a.m, marking the last store on my clipboard. The whole mall felt wrong tonight. I'd been trying to shake off the feeling since I spotted that mannequin in the middle of the walkway, but couldn't stop thinking about it. Something about this place after hours was getting to me. I clicked my radio, trying Alvin again. "Hey, Alvin, you copy? East Wing's all clear." Nothing but static came back. He should have finished his sweep of the West Wing by now. Maybe his radio battery died. Wouldn't be the first time our equipment failed us. "Heading to the west section now," I said into the radio anyway, mostly to hear a voice, even if it was just my own. I turned and walked toward the main atrium, my footsteps too loud against the tile. The emergency lights cast everything in a weird blue glow that made ordinary things look alien. I kept my flashlight beam moving, sweeping from side to side as I walked. The atrium used to be the heart of the mall, with its big skylight and the fountain where kids would toss pennies. The renovation crew had drained the water weeks ago, leaving just an empty basin with a few coins stuck to the bottom. As I approached, my light caught something red near the fountain's edge. I stopped walking. A mannequin stood beside the empty fountain. This one wore a red dress, the fabric bright against the dim blue emergency lighting. Long blonde hair cascaded over its shoulders. I recognized it immediately. This was from the Victoria's Secret display on the second level. I'd walked past that store less than an hour ago, and this mannequin had been there, posed in the window, with two others. "What the hell?" I whispered. My hand went to my radio again. "Alvin, do you copy? There's another mannequin out of place. This is getting weird, man." The static hissed back at me, unchanged. I clicked the radio off and clipped it back to my belt. I looked up at the second floor. From where I stood, I could just make out the darkened Victoria's Secret storefront. Too far to see if the display was missing a mannequin, but I knew it was. Just like I knew the one from Brooks Brothers hadn't been moved by the renovation crew. I needed to find Alvin. He'd been in the West Wing for too long. I picked up my pace, moving past the fountain and the red-dressed mannequin. I didn't look at its face as I passed. Didn't want to see its blank eyes or frozen smile. The beam of my flashlight bounced wildly off the walls as I half walked, half jogged toward the West Wing entrance. The corridor narrowed here, with the restrooms on one side and what used to be a cell phone kiosk on the other. "Alvin," I called out, not bothering with the radio now. My voice bounced back at me, hollow and small. I rounded the corner to the West Wing entrance and stopped dead in my tracks. 3 mannequins stood in a line across the corridor, blocking the way. They were arranged shoulder to shoulder, leaving barely any space to pass. 2 wore casual clothes, jeans and t-shirts from American Eagle, if I remembered right. The third stood completely naked, its featureless body gleaming dully in my flashlight beam. "No way," I said, backing up a step. "No way." I swept my light down to the floor. Clear marks scratched the tiles, long straight lines leading from the nearby stores to where the mannequins now stood, like they'd been dragged into position. But by who? And why? I tried the radio again, more urgently this time. "Alvin, do you copy? There's something wrong here. I need you to respond." Nothing but static. I had 2 choices. Go back the way I came or go through. But going back meant abandoning Alvin. And what kind of coward would that make me? He could be hurt somewhere. Maybe he fell, or maybe... I pushed the thought away. I needed to find him. Taking a deep breath, I approached the line of mannequins. Up close, they looked even more unsettling, their blank faces turned slightly inward, as if watching the corridor. I angled my body sideways and looked for the widest gap between them. "This is stupid," I muttered to myself. "They're just mannequins." I turned sideways and began to squeeze between the one in jeans and the naked one. The space was tighter than I'd thought. My uniform shirt caught on something, and I had to press my back against one mannequin to get past. The plastic was cold against my arm, much colder than it should have been in the warm building. I couldn't help the shudder that ran through me at the contact. It felt like touching a corpse. As I pushed through, my face came inches from the naked mannequin's blank one. For a second, just a split second, I could have sworn its head turned slightly toward me. I jerked back, banging into the other mannequin. Both stayed firmly in place, unmoved by my clumsiness. "Get it together," I whispered to myself, squeezing the rest of the way through. Once past them, I took a moment to catch my breath. My heart hammered in my chest, and I felt ridiculous for being so spooked by store displays. But then I looked back at the scratches on the floor and the perfectly positioned mannequins. Someone was messing with me. Had to be. Maybe Alvin was playing some elaborate prank. But as I continued down the corridor into the West Wing, flashlight in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening in Riverside Mall tonight was no prank at all. I found Alvin's radio lying on the floor outside the old Sears store. The black plastic casing looked wrong against the pale tile, abandoned and out of place. It was 2:45 in the morning according to my watch, and the silence pressed in around me. I bent down and picked it up, turning it over in my hand. The power light was still on, glowing green in the darkness. "Alvin?" I spoke into it, my voice sounding too loud in the empty corridor. "You there?" My own voice crackled back at me from the radio clipped to my belt, creating a strange echo effect that made the hair on my arm stand up. I tried again. "Alvin, it's Rowan. Where are you, man?" Nothing but my own words bouncing back. I clipped his radio to my belt next to mine and looked at the entrance to Sears. The store had been one of the first to close even before the renovation started. Its shuttered facade with the faded logo above made it look like the entrance to a cave. I pointed my flashlight toward the darkened storefront. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing the metal security gate pulled halfway down. There was enough space to duck under it. "Alvin?" I called out, my voice carrying through the empty space. I took a deep breath and crouched down, sliding under the gate. The sound of metal scraping against my back made me wince. Once inside, I straightened up and swept my flashlight around. Sears looked like a retail graveyard. Empty shelving units stood in rows like skeletons. A few broken mannequins were piled in one corner, missing arms and legs. Dust particles danced in my flashlight beam. The air smelled stale and unused. I walked slowly through what used to be the men's department, my footsteps echoing on the bare concrete floor. Most of the fixtures had been removed, but a few empty clothing racks remained, their hangers long gone. "Alvin?" I called again, listening for any response. My watch read 3 in the morning when I reached what must have been the center of the store. I swept my flashlight in an arc and froze. Alvin lay on his back in the middle of the floor. Around him, 12 mannequins stood in a perfect circle, all facing inward toward his body. Each one was positioned exactly the same distance apart, like they'd been placed with careful precision. "Alvin!" I rushed forward, then slowed as I approached the circle of mannequins. They were all different types, some male, some female, some with wigs, others bald. Their blank faces all pointed down toward Alvin's still form. I had to step between 2 of them to reach him. Their plastic bodies seemed to loom over me as I passed. Alvin's eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. His face was locked in an expression I'd never seen on him before. Pure terror. His uniform shirt was torn across the chest, the fabric ripped in several places, but I couldn't see any blood or obvious injuries. His flashlight lay beside him, still on, casting strange shadows across his face. I knelt beside him and pressed my fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse I already knew wouldn't be there. His skin felt cold and waxy under my touch. "Alvin," I whispered, "what happened to you?" I pulled my hand back and stood up, backing away from his body. I needed to call for help. I reached into my pocket for my cell phone, pulled it out, and saw the no service message on the screen. I tried anyway, dialing 911, but the call wouldn't go through. "Damn it," I muttered, looking back at Alvin's body. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The mannequins were gone. All 12 of them had completely vanished. I spun around, sweeping my flashlight across the empty sales floor. There was nowhere they could have gone, no place to hide. They were just gone. What the hell? My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. My heart started hammering in my chest. I backed away from Alvin's body, keeping my flashlight trained on him as if he might disappear too. I needed to get out. I needed to find a phone that worked. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding on the concrete floor as I retraced my path through the empty store. I reached the entrance and ducked under the security gate, emerging into the main corridor of the mall. I straightened up, ready to make a run for the security office. I stopped cold. The corridor that had been empty minutes ago was now filled with mannequins. Dozens of them lined both sides of the hallway, standing shoulder to shoulder like silent sentinels. Some wore clothes, others were naked, their smooth plastic bodies gleaming in the beam of my flashlight. They hadn't been there when I went into Sears. I was absolutely certain of that. I stood frozen, my breath coming in short gasps. The mannequins didn't move, but their presence blocked my path in both directions. Their blank faces seemed to watch me, even though their painted eyes stared straight ahead. I was trapped between them and the darkness of Sears behind me, where Alvin's body lay surrounded by impossible emptiness. I tried to find my way back to the security office at 3:30 in the morning. The service corridor seemed like the safest route, narrow, utilitarian passages that the mannequins would have trouble navigating if they were actually moving. Part of me still couldn't believe what I was seeing, even after finding Alvin. My flashlight beam bounced off the beige walls as I moved through the corridor. The smell of industrial cleaner hung in the air, mixed with the musty scent of rarely disturbed dust. I kept my footsteps as quiet as possible, wincing each time my boots squeaked against the linoleum floor. Just get to the office, call for help, and get out, I whispered to myself, the sound of my own voice oddly comforting in the silence. I reached the service door that led directly to the back hallway near our office. My hand closed around the cold metal handle, and I pulled it open. I froze. 5 mannequins stood packed together on the other side, blocking the passage completely. One had its arm extended toward me, fingers splayed as if reaching for the door. For me. Their blank faces stared forward, but somehow I felt them looking at me. Jesus. I slammed the door shut with enough force to make my palms sting. A loud thud hit the other side of the door, the impact vibrating through the metal and into my hands. I jumped back, nearly dropping my flashlight. One of them, had struck the door. "This isn't happening," I said, backing away. My breath came in short gasps. This can't be happening. I turned and moved quickly down the corridor, away from the door. My original plan was shot. I needed a new exit strategy. The main entrance. It was the furthest point from where I stood now, but it offered the clearest path out of the building. Wide corridors, glass doors I could see through before approaching. No more surprise ambushes. I took a right at the next junction, heading toward the central atrium. As I rounded the corner, a mannequin stood against the wall, wearing a tennis outfit. I could have sworn it wasn't there when I passed this spot earlier. I gave it a wide berth, keeping my flashlight trained on it as I moved past. When I looked forward again and then glanced back, the mannequin seemed closer to the center of the hallway than before. "What the hell?" I muttered, picking up my pace. As I continued through the service area toward the public corridors, I noticed more mannequins. 2 by a supply closet, 1 near a drinking fountain. Each time I looked away and back, they appeared to have shifted position slightly. A turned head, an adjusted arm, a step closer to me. I caught movement in my peripheral vision and whipped my head around. The mannequin by the drinking fountain had its head angled toward me now, I was certain of it. But as I stared directly at it, it remained perfectly still, its blank face revealing nothing. "I see you," I said, my voice cracking. "I know what you're doing." I walked backward for several steps, keeping my eyes on the mannequin before turning and breaking into a jog. I needed to reach the main part of the mall. I pushed through a set of double doors and emerged into the west corridor. Mannequins lined both sides now, some in store windows, others standing free in the walkway. Their positions made no sense. No display coordinator would arrange them this way, scattered randomly through the space. I moved as quickly as I dared, constantly scanning around me. Each time I looked forward and then back to the sides, the mannequins had changed. A head turned here, an arm raised there, always in my peripheral vision, never when I looked directly at them. "Stay back," I warned, though I felt ridiculous talking to plastic figures. By 3:45, I reached the food court. I stopped short at the entrance, my mouth falling open at the scene before me. Every table was occupied by mannequins. They sat in chairs as if enjoying meals together, some positioned across from each other as couples, others in groups of 3 or 4. Some had their plastic hands resting on the tables, others positioned as if mid-conversation. One table near the center had a mannequin with its arm raised, as if toasting the others. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. I needed to cross the food court to reach the main entrance beyond it. There was no way around. I had to go through this disturbing plastic dinner party. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, choosing a path between tables that gave me the most distance from any mannequin. My flashlight beam swept across their blank faces as I moved, casting strange shadows that made them seem even more alive. I was halfway through when I heard it, a creaking sound like plastic rubbing against plastic. It came from behind me, my skin crawled with goosebumps. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around to see what was happening. But something deeper told me that looking back would be worse than not knowing. I kept moving forward, my pace quickening. More creaking sounds followed, soft but unmistakable in the silence of the mall. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep the flashlight beam steady. "Don't look back," I told myself, focusing on the exit ahead. "Just keep moving." The creaking grew louder, more frequent. I imagined the mannequins rising from their seats, turning their heads to watch me, taking steps to follow. My breathing came in ragged gasps now. I weaved between the last few tables, my eyes fixed on the corridor beyond the food court that led to the main entrance. Just 100 more feet and I'd reach the doors. The plastic creaking behind me intensified, joined by what sounded like footsteps. Light, unnatural footsteps with a slight tap to them, like hard plastic on tile. My fear grew with each step, a cold weight pressing against my chest. I wanted to run but worried that sudden movement might trigger something worse. So I maintained my careful pace, moving deliberately toward the exit while the sounds behind me continued. The main entrance was ahead now. I could see the glass doors, the darkness beyond them. I just needed to keep going, to not look back, to reach those doors and get out of this nightmare. I spotted the main entrance at 4 in the morning, the glass doors and the parking lot beyond just beginning to lighten with the pre-dawn glow. My shoulders sagged with relief for a split second before I realized what stood between me and freedom. Mannequins, dozens of them, packed shoulder to shoulder in a tight formation, blocking every inch of the exit. Their blank faces seemed to stare right through me. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I backed up a step, my boot heel catching on the tile. The mannequins didn't move, but they didn't need to. They had me cornered, and somehow I knew they were just waiting. My eyes darted around, looking for another way out. There wasn't one. The main entrance was it. My only shot at escaping this nightmare. I couldn't go back through the mall, not with what I'd seen, not with Alvin lying dead back there. That's when I spotted the metal trash can near the information kiosk. It wasn't much, but it was something. I rushed over and grabbed it, dumping out the contents, old receipts, a soda cup, some wadded-up napkins. The can was lighter than I expected, but solid enough. I gripped it by its rim, the metal cool against my sweaty palms. "Okay," I said to myself. "Okay." I took a deep breath and charged forward, swinging the trash can like a battering ram. It connected with the first mannequin with a hollow boom that rang through the empty mall. The impact sent a shock up my arms, but the mannequin toppled backward, crashing into the ones behind it. Its arm broke off with a crack, skittering across the floor like a pale spider. For a moment, I stood frozen, surprised by my own action and its effect. Then everything changed. The mannequins began to move. Not the subtle, did I just imagine that movement from before? They walked toward me with stiff, unnatural movements, like stop-motion animation come to life. Their joints bent at odd angles, plastic limbs swinging with mechanical precision. But their faces stayed the same. Blank, expressionless. Empty eyes fixed forward as their hands reached for me. "Stay back!" I yelled, swinging the trash can again. It connected with another mannequin, denting its chest with a crunch of plastic. I pushed forward, trying to create a path to the doors. Just a few more feet, just a little farther. Something grabbed my shoulder from behind. I yelped and spun around to face a female mannequin, its hand clamped onto my security jacket with impossible strength. I pulled away, but its fingers dug in deeper. "Let go!" I twisted my body hard, feeling the fabric of my jacket tear. I slipped out of it, leaving the garment in the mannequin's grip. The cold air hit my arms through my thin undershirt, raising goosebumps. More mannequins closed in. I swung the trash can in a wide arc, keeping them at bay for a moment. The metal was denting now, losing its shape with each impact. I backed toward the doors, trying to keep my eyes on all of them at once. A hand grabbed my ankle. I looked down to see a mannequin on the floor, the first one I'd knocked over, its remaining arm wrapped around my leg. I kicked at it, my boot connecting with its face. The plastic cracked, but the grip didn't loosen. Another mannequin lunged from the side. I raised my arm to block it, but plastic fingers raked across my cheek. Pain flared hot and sharp. I touched my face and my fingers came away wet with blood. "Get off me!" I shouted, swinging the trash can again. It connected with a mannequin's head, sending it flying across the floor. The body kept coming, headless now, arms outstretched. I was so focused on the one in front of me that I missed the mannequin coming from behind. It caught my other leg, and suddenly I was falling. The trash can clattered from my grip as I hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. I rolled onto my back, gasping for air. The mannequins pressed in around me, a circle of blank faces and reaching hands. One dropped to its knees beside me, plastic fingers closing around my wrist. I punched it in the face, feeling plastic crack under my knuckles. My hand throbbed with pain, but I kept swinging, kept kicking as they closed in. Another mannequin grabbed my leg. I kicked it square in the chest, sending it tumbling backward. I scrambled backward on the floor, my back hitting something solid, the information desk. I pulled myself up, using it for leverage, and grabbed the trash can again. It was badly dented now, barely holding its shape, but it was all I had. The mannequins kept coming, their movements jerky but relentless. One reached for my face. I ducked and rammed my shoulder into its midsection, feeling plastic bend and crack. Another grabbed at my shirt. I swung the trash can and knocked its arm away. They were all around me now, pressing closer with each second. Their plastic hands reached for me from every direction, fingers grasping at my clothes, my skin, my hair. I fought through them, swinging and kicking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My muscles burned with exhaustion, but I kept moving toward the doors. They were so close now, just a few more feet. A mannequin stepped directly in my path. I lowered my shoulder and charged, using the last of my strength to plow through it. We both went down in a tangle of limbs, mine flesh and blood, its hard plastic. I felt something in its chest give way as I landed on top of it. I pushed myself up, every muscle screaming in protest. My face stung where I'd been scratched, and I could feel blood trickling down my cheek. But I was almost there, almost free. I broke through the last line of mannequins, my shoulder slamming against the glass door with a thud that rattled through my entire body. The door gave way, and I stumbled out into the parking lot, my boots scraping against the rough asphalt as I fought to keep my balance. The cool morning air hit my face, a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere inside the mall. Above me, the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pale orange and pink. My lungs burned as I sucked in deep breaths of fresh air. I took a few more unsteady steps forward before turning back to look at the entrance. They stood there, motionless. Dozens of mannequins crowded the glass doors, their blank faces pressed against the transparent surface, watching me. But they didn't follow. They didn't push through the doors like I had feared they would. They just watched. "Stay back," I whispered, though I knew they couldn't hear me. I took another step backward, my eyes fixed on the mall entrance. As the sunlight grew stronger, casting long shadows across the parking lot, the mannequins began to retreat. They moved with those same jerky, unnatural movements I'd seen inside, backing away from the light that now streamed through the glass doors. One by one, they disappeared into the shadows of the mall until the entrance stood empty. I stood there for a moment, my breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to process what I was seeing. The mannequins were afraid of the light, or maybe they just couldn't leave the mall. Whatever the reason, I wasn't about to question my luck. My car sat where I'd left it hours ago, though it felt like days had passed since I'd arrived for my shift. I fumbled in my pocket for my keys, my fingers numb and clumsy. When I finally pulled them out, my hands were shaking so badly that the keys slipped through my fingers and clattered to the ground. "Damn it," I muttered, bending down to pick them up. My muscles ached in protest, and I noticed a tear in my uniform pants at the knee, the fabric stained with something dark. Blood? My blood? I grabbed the keys and straightened up, glancing back at the mall one more time. Still empty. I took a few steps toward my car, then dropped the keys again when my trembling fingers failed to keep hold of them. Come on," I said, my voice cracking as I scooped them up again. This time I managed to keep my grip long enough to reach my car. I jabbed the key at the lock, missing twice before finally sliding it in and turning it. The familiar click of the lock was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I yanked the door open and practically fell into the driver's seat, pulling the door shut behind me with more force than necessary. The slam echoed across the empty parking lot. I sat there for a second, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to stop shaking. Alvin was dead. The mannequins had killed him, and they'd tried to kill me too. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine coughed to life, and I threw the car into reverse, backing out of the parking space without even checking my mirrors. I shifted into drive and pressed the gas pedal to the floor, the tires squealing as I sped toward the exit. I didn't look back at the mall as I turned onto the main road. I couldn't. All I could think about was getting to the police station as fast as possible. The streets were empty this early in the morning. The traffic lights changed from red to green and back again with no cars to command. I blew through a red light, then another, my foot heavy on the gas pedal. The scratches on my face stung, the cool air from the AC making them burn. I reached up to touch my cheek and my fingers came away with traces of blood. My mind raced faster than my car, replaying everything that had happened. The mannequins moving when I wasn't looking. Alvin's body surrounded by them, the way they had come alive, grabbing at me, trying to stop me from leaving. None of it made sense. None of it should have been possible. But it had happened. I had the scratches to prove it. And Alvin was still in there. The police station appeared ahead, a squat brick building with a few patrol cars parked outside. I pulled into the lot and parked crookedly across two spaces, not caring about the poor job. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, trying to collect my thoughts. How was I going to explain this? Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself, and I'd lived through it. But I had to try, for Alvin, and for myself. I took a deep breath and got out of the car, wincing at the pain in my shoulder where I'd rammed the door. My uniform was torn and dirty, my face scratched, my hands still shaking. I looked like I'd been in a fight. I had been in a fight. A fight for my life against something that shouldn't exist. As I walked toward the station entrance, I tried to organize the words in my head. I needed to convince them. I needed them to believe me, to go back to the mall with me, to find Alvin and see the mannequins for themselves. Even as I reached for the door handle, a part of me wondered if anyone would believe the nightmare I had just survived. But I had to try. I had no other choice. I returned to the mall with police officers at 7 in the morning. The sky had brightened into a pale blue, washing away the terror of the night with ordinary daylight. 2 patrol cars and an unmarked sedan parked beside the main entrance, their presence making the mall look almost normal, like they were just there for a routine check. "It's this way," I said, my voice rough from exhaustion. I hadn't slept. After giving my statement at the station, the officers had insisted we return immediately to the scene. My hands still shook as I pointed toward the Sears entrance. Officer Ramirez, a stocky man with a buzz cut and permanently furrowed brow, nodded. "Lead the way, Mr. Sandoval." I hung back as one of the officers unlocked the main doors. The morning light spilled across the floor tiles, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. Everything looked so ordinary now. No mannequins blocked the entrance. No signs of the struggle that had left my uniform torn and my face scratched. "You okay?" asked a female officer, Chen, according to her name tag. "Yeah," I lied, just not eager to go back in there. We walked through the silent corridors, our footsteps creating a rhythm against the tile. I kept glancing into store windows as we passed. In each one, mannequins stood in their proper displays, posed in frozen fashion, exactly where they should be. Not a single one stood in the walkways. "The body's in the old Sears," I said, pointing ahead. "Through that security gate." Officer Ramirez ducked under the half-lowered gate first, followed by 2 other officers. I hesitated, then forced myself to follow them inside. The concrete floor felt solid beneath my feet as I led them to the center of the empty department store. Alvin lay exactly where I'd left him, on his back in the middle of the sales floor. His eyes stared at the ceiling, that same expression of terror frozen on his face, but the circle of mannequins that had surrounded him was gone. "Jesus," muttered one of the officers, kneeling beside Alvin's body. "Where are the mannequins?" I asked, looking around the empty space. There were 12 of them, standing in a circle around him. Officer Chen looked at me with a mixture of concern and doubt. "There aren't any mannequins in here, Mr. Sandoval." "They were here," I insisted, my voice rising. "I told you in my statement. They were standing all around him, facing inward." Ramirez exchanged a look with Chen. "We'll need to check the security footage." "Yes," I said quickly. "The cameras. They'll show everything." While the officers called for the medical examiner, I stood off to the side, watching them photograph Alvin's body and the surrounding area. They took notes, measured distances, spoke in low, professional tones. Nobody mentioned mannequins again. An hour later, we gathered in the security office. The room looked untouched since I'd left it the night before. My coffee thermos still sat on the desk, half empty and cold. "Let's see what the cameras picked up," Ramirez said, taking the seat in front of the monitors. I stood behind him, arms crossed tightly across my chest. "The system records everything automatically. Just check the footage from midnight to 4 this morning." Ramirez clicked through the computer interface, pulling up the video archive. He selected the main atrium camera for midnight and hit play. The screen showed static. "That's not right," I said, leaning forward. "Try another camera." He switched to the East Wing corridor. More static. "Every camera," I urged. "Check every camera." For the next 20 minutes, Ramirez cycled through all 36 security cameras. Each one showed the same thing, gray static for the entire night shift. "Looks like a technical malfunction," he said, leaning back in the chair. "That's impossible," I said. "The system was working fine when I started my shift. I watched the feeds myself." Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Sandoval, equipment failures happen, especially in older buildings like this." "This isn't equipment failure," I said, pointing at the screen. "This is..." I stopped myself. What could I say? That the mannequins had somehow disabled the cameras. "We'll have our tech team look at it," Ramirez said, though his tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. "But right now, we need to focus on Mr. Rivera's death." Back in the main corridor, I watched as paramedics wheeled Alvin's body out on a stretcher, covered with a white sheet. The medical examiner, a thin woman with gray-streaked hair, spoke quietly with Ramirez. "Preliminary examination suggests cardiac arrest," she said. "No visible trauma or signs of struggle. We'll know more after the autopsy." "He didn't have a heart attack," I said loudly enough for them to hear. "Something happened to him, something in this mall." The medical examiner gave me a sympathetic look. "Stress can trigger cardiac events, especially in men his age. Was he under any unusual pressure recently?" Before I could answer, Officer Chen approached me, notebook in hand. "Mr. Sandoval, I need to ask about these injuries." She gestured to the scratches on my face. I touched my cheek, feeling the sting of the cuts. "I told you the mannequins attacked me when I tried to leave. One of them scratched me." Chen wrote something in her notebook. "And you're certain these weren't self-inflicted during your panic?" "Self-inflicted?" I stared at her. "Why would I scratch my own face?" "People sometimes injure themselves during extreme stress or panic attacks," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "The mind can play tricks when we're afraid." I looked past her to where Ramirez was talking to another officer, both occasionally glancing my way. Their expressions made it clear what they thought of my story. "Look," I said, lowering my voice. "I know how this sounds, but I'm telling you exactly what happened. The mannequins moved. They surrounded Alvin. They blocked the exits when I tried to leave. They attacked me." I pointed to the tear in my uniform jacket. "You think I did this to myself too?" Chen studied me for a long moment. "Mr. Sandoval, you've been through a traumatic experience. Finding your colleague deceased, alone in an empty mall at night. That would shake anyone. Our minds sometimes create explanations to help us process trauma." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think I made this up?" "I think you believe what you're telling us," she said carefully. I turned away from her, looking down the long corridor of the mall. Morning sunlight streamed through the skylights, making everything look normal and safe. In a window display across from us, 3 mannequins posed in summer outfits, their blank faces turned toward the glass. "Check the floor by the main entrance," I said suddenly. There was a fight there. I knocked over mannequins. I dented a trash can using it as a weapon. Chen nodded. "We'll take a look." 20 minutes later, we stood at the main entrance. The floor was clean. No fallen mannequins, no scattered trash, no signs of any struggle. The trash can by the information kiosk was undented, standing exactly where it belonged. "This is wrong," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "All of this is wrong." Ramirez approached, tucking his notebook into his pocket. "Mr. Sandoval, we've completed our initial investigation. We'll be in touch if we need any additional information." "That's it?" I asked. "You're just going to ignore everything I told you?" "We're not ignoring anything," he said firmly. "We're investigating Mr. Rivera's death thoroughly, but so far, the evidence points to natural causes." "What about my face?" I touched the scratches again. "What about my torn uniform?" "Those injuries are consistent with your statement about running through the mall and fighting to get out," Ramirez said. "But not with animated mannequins." I looked between the officers, seeing the same expression on all their faces, that careful professional mask that said they were humoring me, not believing me. "I'm not crazy," I said. "Nobody's saying you are," Chen replied. "Traumatic experiences affect people differently." They escorted me outside, back into the morning light. As we walked toward the parking lot, I looked back at the mall one last time. Through the glass doors, I could see mannequins in the atrium, standing motionless in their displays. 1 week later, I started a new job at a warehouse across town. The manager had been surprised when I specifically requested day shifts only, but he didn't ask questions. The pay was worse than the security gig, but I didn't care. I needed sunlight. I needed to be around people. Real people. The police called me twice more with follow-up questions, but I could tell from their tone they were just going through the motions. The autopsy confirmed what they'd suspected. Alvin had died of a heart attack. No signs of foul play, no unexplained injuries. Case closed. The scratches on my face healed slowly, leaving thin white lines that caught the light when I turned a certain way. Every morning, I saw them in the mirror, proof that it had happened, that I hadn't imagined it all. I threw away my security uniform, burned it in a trash barrel behind my apartment building. I couldn't stand to look at it, with its torn sleeve and the small bloodstains on the collar. My new co-workers asked about the scars sometimes. I told them I'd been in a car accident. It was easier than the truth. Nobody would believe the truth anyway. 3 weeks after that night, I drove past Riverside Mall on my way to the grocery store. It looked normal from the outside, just a big, aging shopping center with too many empty storefronts. A banner hung across the main entrance. Grand reopening coming soon, renovations complete. I pressed the gas pedal harder, speeding past without looking back. Sometimes at night, I still woke up gasping, convinced I could hear the creaking of plastic joints moving in the darkness. I'd turn on every light in my apartment and sit awake until morning, watching the shadows. My landlord asked once why I'd removed all the decorative figurines from the apartment's built-in shelves. I told him they creeped me out. He laughed, like I'd made a joke. A month after Alvin's death, I ran into his wife at the grocery store. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed. When she saw me, she stopped her cart in the middle of the aisle. "Rowan," she said, "I've been trying to reach you." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I should have called. "The police told me you were there when it happened." Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the shopping cart tightly. "That you found him." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Was he in pain?" she asked. I thought about Alvin's face, frozen in terror, surrounded by those blank-faced mannequins. "No," I lied. "It was quick. He didn't suffer." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you for being with him, for not leaving him alone." I wanted to tell her everything then, about how I'd left him there, how I'd run away to save myself, about what had really happened in that mall. But what good would it do? She was grieving. She needed closure, not nightmares. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said instead. As I walked away, I heard her call after me. "The service is on Sunday, if you want to come." I didn't go to the funeral. I couldn't face all those people, couldn't listen to them talk about heart disease and how unpredictable life can be. I sent flowers and a card with my condolences. 2 months after that night, the dreams began to fade. I could sleep with just a bedside lamp on. I stopped jumping at shadows. The warehouse job became routine, comfortable in its monotony and daylight hours. But I never went shopping at malls anymore. I bought everything online or at standalone stores. And I never ever looked too long at mannequins in store windows. Few people believed my account of what happened that night. Most thought I'd had some kind of breakdown after finding Alvin dead. The police report mentioned possible hallucinations due to shock. My doctor suggested anxiety medication and therapy, but I knew what I'd seen. I knew what had happened in that mall. I had survived something that shouldn't exist, something that had killed Alvin and nearly claimed me too. And sometimes, when I drove past Riverside Mall after its reopening, I could swear I saw the mannequins in the display windows turn their heads slightly, following my car as it passed. I always drove faster, keeping my eyes on the road ahead, never looking back.